Imagine holding in your hand the power to snip out disease, reshape embryos, even enhance traits, an editor's scalpel dancing across the human genome. But when our Creator crafted us in His image, did He grant us creative primacy or set boundaries we dare not cross? I'm Veritas Vox, and today we plunge into the CRISPR revolution and the weighty question: what becomes of the imago Dei when humanity edits itself? Stay tuned as we confront lab benches turned altars and DNA sequences treated like scripture. 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Section 1. From Eden's hand to the scientist's pipette. In Genesis, God breathes life into dust, forging humanity with divine intent. Every cell, a vessel of sacred imprint. Fast forward to 2025. Biologists harness CRISPR-Cas9 to rewrite that code, claiming cures for cancer and prevention of genetic disease. Headlines trumpet designer babies with tailored IQ, disease-free hearts, even resistance to aging. Christian bioethicists watch this alchemy with wary eyes. Some hail it as co-laboring with God's redeeming work, eradicating suffering at its source. Others warn of hubris. When we become authors of the human story, we risk severing our dependence on the divine author. Gene editing operates on two axes: therapy, repairing mutations, and enhancement, amplifying traits. While nearly all agree on therapeutic uses, correcting sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease, the line blurs when moving toward enhancements. If parents can choose height, eye color, cognitive edge, does the ageless promise of self-determination eclipse our creaturely humility? Legislatures wrestle with this frontier. The U.S. FDA has greenlit somatic trials, yet germline editing remains taboo under federal moratorium, binding today's policy at the boundary between healing and hubris. Denominations, from Catholic to evangelical councils, issue cautious statements, affirming therapy, denouncing eugenic enhancement, yet leaving many questions unresolved. Philosophically, the debate fractures on two fault lines: sanctity of creation versus imperative to alleviate suffering, and stewardship of life versus dominion over life. In this genomic battleground, ethics and eschatology collide, forcing us to ask, are we servants called to heal God's world, or tyrants tempted to reforge it? What does it truly mean to bear God's image when our fingertips now edit the code He inscribed in every cell? Imago Dei in Genesis 1:26-27 proclaims humanity made in our image after our likeness. Classical theologians saw this as reflecting God's rationality, morality, and relationality, an ontological dignity not tied to biology alone. Yet if our DNA embodies that image, does editing its structure alter the divine imprint, or merely refine the vessel that carries it? Covenantal bodies. In biblical covenants, bodies serve as signs: circumcision, Genesis 17, baptism, Romans 6. Our fleshly forms testify to sacred promises. Gene editing, then, risks rebranding our covenantal identity as a mutable contract rewritten by human decree rather than divine oath. Stewardship versus sovereignty. Psalm 139 marvels that God knits us in the womb, a poetic assertion of divine sovereignty over our biology. Scripture calls humans to till and keep creation, Genesis 2:15, suggesting stewardship under divine mandate. Where is the boundary where stewardship tips into sovereignty, and we claim God's prerogative for ourselves? Fall and brokenness. Romans 8:20-22 speaks of creation subjected to futility and awaiting liberation. Gene editing's therapeutic promise aligns with hope for renewal. Yet the same text, warns against frustrated longing. Can we edit our way out of suffering without addressing the heart's deeper brokenness? CRISPR is not the first marvel to stir fear and hope. Its precursors teach that our moral compass often lags behind scientific speed. Vaccination's baptism of benefit. Edward Jenner's smallpox vaccine, 1796, met religious resistance. Some saw injecting cowpox as defiling God's design. Yet over time, vaccination became an unequivocal good. The parallel. Will gene therapy follow vaccination's trajectory, gaining universal acceptance, or will its enhancement branch remain taboo? IVF's family frontier. In vitro fertilization, 1978, sparked debates over test tube babies, embryo disposal, and commodification of life. Christian ethicists were divided, yet today IVF is mainstream. The lesson: cultural anxieties often give way to pastoral pragmatism. But will germline editing, a heritable change, cross a second Rubicon of acceptance? Organ transplants and identity. Mid-20th century transplants confronted notions of bodily integrity and identity. If your liver came from another, are you the same person? Today we accept organ donors without existential crisis. Similarly, will edited genes become merely another accepted gift of science, or forever mark recipients as ethically suspect? Digital eugenics. Echoes. Early 20th century eugenics programs, couched in progress rhetoric, led to horrors, sterilizations, and racial purges. While modern gene editing pledges consent and precision, the specter of coercive selection remains. History reminds us that noble ends can be twisted by power unmoored from ethics. In these analogies, we glimpse both redemption and ruin, how new biotechnologies reshape our moral landscape, sometimes healing, sometimes fracturing the fragile trust between humanity and its creator. Leading Christian ethicists stand divided at CRISPR's edge, their warnings and hopes ringing like clarion calls in a genomic cathedral. Reverend Dr. Jennifer H. Smith, Protherapy. Smith champions somatic gene editing to cure inherited diseases. Eradicating Huntington's, she argues, reflects divine compassion incarnate. Yet she draws a firm line. Enhancement of non-life-threatening traits risks crossing from healing into hubris. Professor Daniel R. Ortiz, cautionary voice. Ortiz warns, germline edits rewrite the shared narrative of humanity. We risk fracturing our common story into designer lineages. He urges a moratorium until global consensus emerges, fearing an arms race of genetic privilege. Dr. Rachel Okoye, Justice Advocate. Okoye highlights equity concerns. CRISPR without access control deepens injustice. Only the wealthy will afford disease prevention, entrenching genetic divides. She calls for prioritizing public health funding before market-driven enhancements. Father Thomas Moreland, theological critic. Moreland contends, editing the image of God amounts to redefining the imago Dei on human terms. We lose sight of our creaturely dependence when we claim rights over our genome. He calls for theological protocols alongside scientific review boards. Senior Maria Therese, holistic healer. As a medical missionary, she sees potential. In regions ravaged by sickle cell and thalassemia, CRISPR could be a gospel of healing. Yet she insists on integrating spiritual care. Medical intervention without heart risks treating bodies as machines, not souls made for communion. In the quest to perfect our genetics, we confront doctrines that ground our hope beyond this life and ask whether editing can touch the soul's destiny. Doctrine of original sin. If humanity inherits Adam's fallen genome, then germline editing could be seen as a first step toward undoing inherited sin's consequences. Yet Scripture locates sin's deeper roots in the heart, not chromosomes. Can surgery on DNA undo what only divine grace can heal? Atonement and the body. The cross redeems the whole person, body, and soul. Altering our body's blueprint raises questions. Does engineered immunity to disease parallel Christ's healing ministry, or does it usurp the role of redemption that only Christ can fulfill? Eschatological transformation. Paul's promise of a glorious body, 1 Corinthians. 15. Envisions a transformation beyond natural biology. Germline editing aspires to improve our current bodies, but resurrection yields bodies neither subject to decay nor requiring human tinkering. How do we balance hope for this life with hope for the next? Imago Dei and diversity. God's image thrives in diversity, Jews and Gentiles, slaves and free, male and female. If we edit out undesirable traits, do we homogenize creation, erasing the creative plurality that reflects the Creator's boundless imagination? The good future versus the good life. Christian ethics distinguishes between the good life, flourishing now, and the life everlasting. CRISPR promises improvements in the former, but might it distract us from yearning for the latter? In these theological tensions, the genome becomes scripture. Each base pair a letter, each edit an exegesis on hope, sin, and the body's destiny. From pulpit statements to UN declarations, the world scrambles to corral CRISPR's genie back into its bottle, yet every rule bears the fingerprint of power. Church declarations, the Vatican's Dignitas Personae, 2008, warned against inheritable genetic modifications, insisting on respect for human dignity. More recently, the World Council of Churches urged a global moratorium on germline editing, framing it as an ethical crossing of a red line drawn in the image of God. National bans and moratoria. Over 30 countries outlaw germline modifications outright. The U.S. falls into regulatory limbo. Somatic therapies advance under FDA supervision. While Congress debates clear statutes, states diverge, California's research institutes embrace therapeutic trials, other legislatures propose criminal penalties for unlicensed editing. International conventions. UNESCO's Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights, 1997, asserts the genome's common heritage and calls for oversight. Yet enforcement is voluntary, and no binding treaty exists. The WHO's Expert Advisory Committee recommends precautionary restraint, but national sovereignty ultimately shapes local law. Biotech self-governance. Leading scientists adopted the International Summit on Human Gene Editing consensus statements, urging transparency, stakeholder engagement, and a clear distinction between therapy and enhancement. Yet without teeth, these voluntary codes rely on reputational pressure, more than legal sanction. Ethics review boards, institutional review boards, IRBs, and church-affiliated ethics committees vet CRISPR trials. Their guidelines vary. Some require public comment and theological approval. Others adhere strictly to biomedical norms. The patchwork leaves gaps. DIY garage biology communities exploit loopholes, raising fears of rogue edits beyond oversight. In hospitals and homes, edited genomes flicker into reality. Infants born free of genetic disease, children raised in families forever changed by a single molecular cut. Therapeutic triumphs. In 2023, a child in Boston received CRISPR therapy for sickle cell anemia, now thriving at age 6 with normal hemoglobin. Parents speak of a miracle, yet grapple with the decision's weight. Their child's descendants carry edits they did not consent to. Unintended consequences. A small number of somatic trials report off-target effects, unforeseen mutations in non-target tissues. Families confront unsettling questions. Did we solve one problem only to seed another? The long-term health of edited individuals remains uncertain. Social dynamics. Edited individuals sometimes face stigma. Peers whisper designer baby or Frankenstein kid. Parents worry about identity. Will my daughter see herself as more human or less? The community's gaze becomes a second editor of their self-worth. Global disparities. In high-income nations, CRISPR therapies appear promising. In low-resource regions plagued by malaria-related genetic vulnerabilities, gene drives are tested in mosquitoes rather than humans. The uneven focus underscores a global ethics divide, whose lives we value as worth editing. Narratives of choice and chance. Some families embrace editing as stewardship, others reject it as boundary transgression. Christian support groups wrestle with these stories, praying over DNA edits as comfort or confession, reminding us that edited futures are, at heart, lived stories, not sterile data points. In sterile labs, pipettes hover like scalpel-poised judges. Do we snip out suffering or sever our own humanity? Consent in embryos. Lab scientists wrestle with the fact that future generations bear the burden of today's edits without choice. Dr. Elna Ferris, a somatic cell expert, confesses, "Every embryo is voiceless. Our edits speak for them. Do we honor potential life or impose our will?" Slippery slope to enhancement. Junior researcher Marcus Lee recounts the thrill of increasing disease resistance in cell cultures, then the unease when he was asked about boosting muscle genes. The line between cure and cosmetic is thinner than a DNA strand, he warns. Dual-use dangers. CRISPR's power to eradicate pathogens can also create bioweapons. Biosecurity officers note a chilling irony. The same protocols designed to save life could engineer unprecedented plagues if ethics falter. Values versus victory. Researchers seeking publication feel pressure to promise breakthrough impact. Dr. Rue admits she toned down ethical caveats in her landmark paper to satisfy funding bodies. Publish or perish, you bend your conscience so the grants keep coming. Professional codes in crisis, institutional review boards debate adding spiritual dimensions to their oversight. Some scientists welcome theologians at the table, others fear religion's intrusion will stifle innovation. The question looms, can a secular lab respect sacred concerns without crippling discovery? As our genomes morph at the lab bench, the fault lines of kinship, community, and faith tremble, demanding we chart new maps of belonging. Bloodlines and belonging. If parents edit out genetic disorders, will natural birth become stigmatized? Genetic purity tests may echo eugenic hallmarks, fracturing families into edited and unedited. Religious identity at risk. Faith traditions rooted in embodied lineage, Jewish matrilineal descent, Christian baptism, may face challenges when genetics no longer align with heritage. Who is a child of covenant if DNA becomes a negotiable trait? Marriage and kinship laws. Genetic compatibility checks for prospective spouses could emerge, echoing dystopian fictions. Will faith-filled matchmakers resist or adapt genetic counseling into pre-marital rights? Concept of suffering. If suffering can be genetically erased, theological reflections on solidarity with pain, lament, and redemptive suffering will shift. Pastors fear a therapy trap where disease is moralized as a failure to edit. Eschatological impasse. The promise of perfect bodies here and now tempts us to shortcut resurrection hope. Yet if we perfect our biology, will we still long for divine transformation or surrender to imagined self-sufficiency? Each edit echoes beyond the lab, rewiring not only nucleotides, but the very narratives that bind us as humans and as bearers of God's image. As edited lives emerge, families and congregations become living laboratories, navigating new questions of kinship, dignity, and belonging. Family covenant. Tested. When a child born with an edited genome joins a church nursery, grandparents may hesitate. Is this still our flesh and blood? Families wrestle with extending unconditional love to descendants shaped by human hands. Sunday school circles become spaces of whispered wonder. How do we baptize altered DNA? Congregational care models. Some churches establish genetic support groups, blending biomedical counsel with pastoral prayer. Peers share narratives of relief and guilt, celebrating disease eradication while mourning the loss of unedited legacy. These gatherings become rites for naming edited identity in a spiritual community. Rites of passage. Reimagined, baptismal liturgies may incorporate affirmations of God's image refined, not replaced. Confirmation classes debate whether editing aligns with stewardship or infringes on divine sovereignty. Communion tables host discussions on whether edited bodies partake differently in the Eucharistic mystery. Social ethics in action. Faith-based nonprofits must decide whether to include edited individuals in bioethics panels, job ministries, or mission trips. Do designer children qualify for disability support groups? Congregations face practical moral work, crafting policies that neither exoticize nor erase edited bodies. Public witness and testimony. Edited adults stand as living exemplars, speaking in pulpits about cured afflictions and the weight of their unique creation stories. Their testimonies carry prophetic power, challenging churches to expand theological language around creation, fall, and redemption. When we cut and paste our genome, what cuts and pastes within our souls? And what sanctuary do we lose or gain before the divine editor? Alienation from creation. Editing our code risks estrangement from the natural world. A rupture in the communion with all creatures God proclaimed very good. Have we severed a thread in the tapestry of creation? Hubris versus humility. The impulse to master our biology mirrors Babel's tower, an ambition that invites divine recalibration. True humility recognizes our finitude. Genetic omnipotence tempts us to forget it. Security in the sovereign. Relying on CRISPR for physical wholeness may undercut trust in God's providential care. If every ailment is fixable in a lab, does prayer for healing become obsolete? Or a deeper act of faith? Erosion of solidarity. As suffering retreats behind edited walls, communities risk losing the empathy forged in shared vulnerability. Will edited individuals feel less bound by collective laments and the communal hope that arises from them? Redemption's final chapter. The greatest edit awaits not in our hands, but in the hands of Christ, who will make all things new. Revelation. Irubatti. Undrainde. Our laboratory triumphs may be mere prelude to that ultimate recreation. As our DNA becomes canvas, culture reflects and refracts the edited imago Dei through stories, symbols, and sacred spaces. Speculative fiction and dystopia. Novels like Redesign and films such as Genome imagine futures where genetic privilege spawns new castes. Protagonists grapple with identity crises. Are they chosen by God or crafted by gatekeepers? These narratives warn that editing can fracture society's soul. Fine art explorations. Contemporary painters and sculptors display works of hybrid form, portraits where subjects' features subtly blur into code. Galleries host interactive gene anatomy exhibits, prompting viewers to confront their own editable flesh, evoking awe and unease about the creator's blueprint. Worship innovations. Some progressive churches introduce DNA meditations, using personalized genetic reports in prayer services, celebrating uniqueness as divine fingerprint. Opponents decry these as techno-idolatry, fearing that worship shifts from worshiping God to glorifying human mastery. Music and liturgy. Composers blend natural sounds, heartbeats, cell processes, with organ and choir to create genome masses. Hymns now include lyrics like, "You knit me whole, but we refine the strands," merging thanksgiving with uneasy concession to human intervention. Digital theology. Podcasts and YouTube series host genetic counselors in theological dialogue, debating whether CRISPR is gift or gamble. These platforms shape believers' imaginations, casting edited genomes as either new sacrament or slippery slope. Gene editing extends our reach into creation's core, yet calls us to embrace the limits that define our humanity and our dependence on the divine. Power and proviso. CRISPR grants us unprecedented power, but every edit carries a proviso. Unintended consequences. True wisdom holds both ambition and restraint in tension, creator and creature. We mirror God's creativity when we heal, yet must remember we remain creatures subject to limits. Our labs are workshops, not thrones. Healing versus hubris. Pursuit of healing honors. Scripture's call to alleviate suffering. Pursuit of enhancement risks hubris, echoing Babel more than beatitude. Freedom and fidelity. Editing offers freedom from genetic doom, yet fidelity to the Creator requires humility before mysteries we cannot decode. Hope's horizon. Our ultimate hope lies beyond any human edit, in the final recreation by Christ. Until then, may every gene cut bow before the cross that heals the deepest brokenness. As we stand at the brink of rewriting life's code, our character must remain unedited, rooted in humility, justice, and wonder. Champion vulnerable voices, advocate for policies that prioritize therapeutic uses while guarding against enhancement arms races. Let the weakest among us, those battling genetic disease, guide our moral compass. Embrace shared stewardship. Form multi-stakeholder councils, scientists, theologians, ethicists, community leaders, to oversee research. True stewardship arises when power is balanced by diverse wisdom. Cultivate genetic humility. Recognize that our understanding of the genome is incomplete. Approach each edit with reverence, not triumphalism, aware that God's design may exceed our wildest models. Center human dignity. Over-design, resist narratives that value individuals by their engineered traits. Every life, edited or unedited, bears the imago Dei and deserves unwavering respect. Hold fast to eschatological hope. While CRISPR offers glimpses of life renewed, our ultimate redemption awaits the divine editor. Live in the tension. Work for healing now, yet long for the body perfected at Christ's return. The next chapter of human history lies unwritten in our choices, each edit, each policy, each prayer inked into the living code of creation. Daily praxis of grace. In labs and clinics, pair every protocol with prayer, seeking wisdom as fervently as data. Let grace temper our experiments. Narratives that heal. Share stories of edited lives shaped by compassion, testimonies that attest to both scientific marvel and spiritual mystery. Intergenerational dialogue. Mentor younger believers in bioethics, forging a legacy that values life's sanctity over genetic perfection. Liturgical commemoration. Incorporate prayers for scientists and the edited into worship, acknowledging our dependence on God's ongoing creation. A future of shared flourishing. Envision a world where gene editing eradicates suffering without fracturing our shared humanity, where every edited genome sings the Imago Dei in fresh harmony. I am Veritas Vox. We've charted the genome's uncharted waters and wrestled with God's image in our hands. May you move forward with both curiosity and caution, shaping tomorrow's human story with hearts aligned to the divine author.